Our guest today is Barbara Gregorich. She's here all the way from Chicago. And when she was growing up, she yearned to be a baseball player or a writer. So she kind of combined those things. Her best known book for adults is Women at Play, The Story of Women in Baseball. She's a member of the American Baseball Research Society, and also is the author of She's on First, a fictional account. In addition to writing for adults and speaking on various subjects ranging from baseball to grammar, Barbara has written more than 150 children's books and workbooks. She teaches workshops on writing. She's a member of the Authors Guild, Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, Mystery Writers of America, Sisters in Crime, and Private Eye Writers of America. She's also into basket weaving, is that correct? And her husband, I learned today, plays the hammered dulcimer, an Appalachian instrument. He has done a collection of Civil War songs on the hammered dulcimer, which will be available in the library as soon as I am finished with it. Barbara's program is entitled When Women Play Baseball, The Story of Margaret, Nellie, and Rose. And here she has books for sale as well. So here she is, Barbara Gregorich.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really enjoying my stay in Wheeling. Is that a little too loud, Sean, or is that okay back there? A little too loud. Okay. Is that better? No. Too loud. I'm always accused of speaking too loud. Okay. As I said, I'm really enjoying my stay in Wheeling, and I hope that when I'm finished with my speech, you will have enjoyed my stay in Wheeling. My talk is entitled Margaret, Nellie, and Rose, When Women Played Baseball. The three individuals I'll be talking about are Margaret Gisolo of Blandford, Indiana, Nellie Kearns of West Union, Illinois, and Rose Gacioch of Wheeling, West Virginia. Their story actually begins with a woman named Maud Nelson, whose real name is Clementina Brida. She was born in the Tyrol district of Italy, in northern Italy. Her father was a coal miner. Her brothers came to Mahanoy City, Pennsylvania, the anthracite coal district in eastern Pennsylvania, and were miners there. When she was 14 years old, Clementina, who soon took the name Maud as her baseball playing name, at the age of 14, she emigrated to this country. She learned how to play baseball, and by 1892, she was playing baseball. Aiming this the wrong way. The first team you see there, that is Maud right there, was the first of many teams she formed. The first of two very well-known teams she formed, called the Western Bloomer Girls. The second, which you will be seeing a lot of because it concerns Margaret, Nellie, and Rose, was the All-Star Ranger Girls, which Maud formed in 1924. The teams that Maud played on and built were called Bloomer Girl teams. And they had certain characteristics. First of all, they were integrated, sexually integrated with women and men. They started out being 6 women and 3 men, but after several years of experiment in the early 1890s, they ended up being 7 women and 2 men. The catcher was always a man because of collisions at the plate. A man's body is bigger, stronger, and the man could take the collision better because the Bloomer Girl teams always played against all male teams. So it would always be a man running toward home to score. The other man usually played center field, sometimes shortstop, but most likely center field. And the second man sometimes came in to pitch innings 8 and 9. The Bloomer Girl teams were all barnstormers, and that's going to become important to the story of Margaret, Nellie, and Rose. They had no home stadium, no place to practice unless they were allowed to practice in the field or stadium of another team. They were always on the road. When Maud started out playing baseball in the 1890s, She would start out in January in Florida. The team would work its way north through Georgia, the Carolinas, Virginia, West Virginia, and then they would go in one of two directions depending on which year it was. Some years they turned east and went up through Pennsylvania and New York and ended up in Maine and then worked their way back down. Their season lasted from January through October. Or, when they reached West Virginia, they would swing west and go through Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and they would end up in Oregon. So, they put a lot of miles on the road. They traveled by train. And as I said, they always played against all-male teams. Now, Maude built these teams, the Western Bloomer girls and the All-Star Ranger girls, in one of two ways. Actually, it's all the same way. She was what we would today call a great networker. Okay? Everywhere she went, and she went a lot of places, she read the newspapers looking for other young women who played baseball. She wrote down their names and addresses and wrote letters to them if they were over 18 or their parents if they were younger. And she also called. If she wanted someone to play on her team, she said she'd call the person's home if they had a phone and say, I read about such and such a person. Would she like a tryout with my team? So she was always reading, always traveling, always building the team with the best possible players. The better her teams were, the more money they made, because more people would come and pay at the gate to see these teams. Now, Maude had heard of wheeling, yes, but Maude had not heard of Rose Gacioch yet. She had, however, heard of Margaret Gisolo, who was born in Blandford, Indiana in 1914. Blandford was an Italian immigrant community of coal miners, and Margaret and her 5 sisters and 2 brothers grew up there. They grew up, Margaret and her 2 brothers, but not her sisters. They grew up playing baseball. Margaret could not remember a time when she didn't play baseball. And in 1928, everyone in the United States learned about Margaret Gisolo because the American Legion, with the cooperation of Major League Baseball, the cooperation and money of Major League Baseball, started a national baseball program called American Legion Baseball. It was for young people ages 14 to 18. And its purpose, as stated in the charter, was to teach Americanism to the youth of the country. Keep that in mind, to teach Americanism to the youth of the country. Okay, Margaret had been playing since she was in 1st grade. In fact, the school she went to had a 1st grade baseball team, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. Margaret was now in 9th grade. The tiny little town of Blandford decided it would have an American Legion baseball team, and it called for tryouts, and Margaret tried out for the Blandford Cubs and was assigned to 2nd base. Now, this tiny little team from Indiana went on to a 7-game, they defeated everyone they played. And then they went into a 7-game playoff series against bigger towns and tougher teams, such as Terre Haute, Indianapolis. In the 7 games of playoffs, Margaret had 9 hits in 21 at-bats, which comes to a 4.29 batting average. As 2nd baseman, she had 10 putouts, 28 assists, and 0 errors. Pretty good baseball. She was considered by all the newspapers in Indiana and all the newspapers east of the Mississippi River one of the 3 stars of the come-from-behind small coal mining town Blandford Cubs. Everyone was talking about Margaret Gisolo in 1928. She was even in the movie newsreels. Margaret's reward for playing such great baseball was that the American Junior League Baseball, with the agreement of Baseball Commissioner Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, rewrote its charter to exclude girls from baseball. That's it. We don't want you. We don't care if you could help win a championship. You're a girl. Get out. Margaret had no place to go. She wanted to play baseball. She was, in fact, a baseball player. This is what she had been doing besides learning reading, writing, and arithmetic since first grade. This is a photo of Margaret with her older brother, Tony, who played minor league baseball. Well, Margaret had not heard of Maud Nelson, but Maud Nelson had heard of Margaret Gisolo. And Margaret wrote a letter. Maud wrote a letter to Margaret's parents asking if Margaret could play on the All-Star Ranger girls baseball team, indicating that a friend in need is a friend indeed, that friend being Maud. This is Margaret, right here, the fifth one from the left. She played with the All-Star Ranger girls for 6 years and earned enough money to put herself through school. The man, let me go back one, standing on the left there, that is Lee Chandler, who went on to play for the Chicago White Sox in their minor league system. In 1933, Lee Chandler, who was from Chicago, actually from Minnesota originally, but his family moved to Chicago, heard that there were going to be baseball tryouts in Lincoln Park. So he and his friend went, and he was astonished. It was women playing baseball, girls and women playing baseball, and he was about to turn around and leave when he thought, well, let's see what they're like. So he watched and he thought, they are pretty good. And so he decided he would try out to be one of the men on the team. And he was accepted, as was his friend. Lee was about 6 feet 2 inches tall. I think he was about 175, 80 pounds. He was a very strong hitter. He batted cleanup as one of the 2 men on the All-Star Ranger girls. And he was fast. He turned many a triple into an inside-the-park home run. He was always applauded for hitting home runs and being very fast. He was great base running. He loved playing with the women on the team, and of Margaret, he said, Margaret was a good fielder. She had a glove as big as a wash tub at first base. I threw short to her, and she scooped them up, and the crowd went crazy. We did it deliberately. So there was a lot of showmanship there with the All-Star Ranger girls. They entertained the crowd not only through good baseball, but through some antics. And I'm showing you this photo because this comes up later with something Rose Gacioch said. Maud Nelson required 3 things of all her players. 1, that they play good baseball. 2, that before each game, they dress up in silken Ranger girl Western outfits and parade through town, in whatever town they were in, to help build the game. And 3rd, Maud really wanted all her players to be exposed to history and culture. Even though she wasn't born in this country, she learned all about it. Therefore, every day, even on the days that they had 3 baseball games, one at 10 in the morning, one at 1 in the afternoon, and one at 5 in the afternoon, they were exposed, thanks to Maud, to history and culture. She exposed them to geography. You would be amazed at how many people, even today in this country, born here, cannot name the 5 Great Lakes. Maud made sure that her players saw and got to name and know where the 5 Great Lakes were. Okay, she also took them to historic places. Margaret Gisolo once, who kept a diary during the years 1933 and 1934, once wrote in her diary, Maud took us to see the place where William Penn landed when he came to this country. Maud also took them to other sporting events, particularly tennis. And movies and theater. So they had to parade through town, they had to play baseball, and they had to learn some history and culture thanks to Maud. Now Margaret, like any young person or older person, had dreams. She was the only one of the three, Margaret, Nellie, and Rose, whose dreams were not really focused. All Margaret knew was that she loved movement. And though she usually kept her head in the game, playing second base or first base, occasionally, if it was slow or something, she would watch the movement in the infield. The movement mesmerized her, especially the plays at second base. This was her dream. It involved movement. Other than that, she didn't know what she wanted to do when when her baseball career was over. And that brings us to Nellie Kearns, who grew up in West Union, Illinois. She was born in 1912. West Union, Illinois is about 35 miles west of Blandford, Indiana, just across the Wabash River. Nellie's ancestors were French Huguenot, Welsh, English, and she traces her roots way back to, I think she said, 1680 in this country. To understand the story of Nellie and why Nellie ended up on the All-Star Ranger Girls, you have to understand what happened to Leona Kearns, who was Nellie's older sister by 2 years. Leona and Nellie grew up playing baseball. Their other three sisters didn't care about baseball, but Leona pitched and Nellie caught, so they were a battery. They were sisters who loved each other, but they were also a pitcher and catcher together. Leona was 6 feet tall and great athlete. The men in the town of West Union asked her to play on their baseball team, which she did. She was written about in the papers, and a man named Eddie Ainsmith, a former major league player who at one time was the catcher for Walter Johnson of the Washington Senators, was in 1925 going to tour Japan with a team of American girls and women to play against Japanese men's teams. Everyone was doing this in the 1920s. Babe Ruth even toured Japan in the 1920s. Ainsmith had read of Leona and asked her parents permission that she go to Japan with him and his wife Loretta. So Eddie and Loretta Ainsmith took a train to West Union, got permission from Leona's parents. Her mother did not want her to go, but Leona begged, and her father finally said, oh, please, let her go. And Ainsmith told every player on the team. He hooked up with a woman named Mary O'Gara, who managed the Philadelphia Bobbies, a team of all girls and women, ages 13 through 18. So together they met in Chicago, and they all took the train to Seattle as the team, the USA team. And from Seattle they took the SS President Jefferson to Tokyo. There they played against men's teams. This is a picture of the team in 1925 in Japan. This is Eddie Ainsmith. This is Leona Kearns. This is a former teammate of Eddie Ainsmith who served as assistant. This young girl is 13 years old, Edith Houghton. She went on to a great baseball playing career and later became a scout for the Philadelphia Phillies. Leona wrote home saying that she was very disappointed in the quality of these players, except for Edie Houghton and Eddie Ainsmith. Leona's instincts were probably right, because this team lost game after game after game. The Japanese promoters, who had promised that each player would go home with $400 in their pocket, drifted away, and there was no legal recourse. The team had no income because after they lost so many games, no Japanese team wanted to play against them. On top of that, there was a dispute between Eddie Ainsmith, who brought with him only his wife and Leona Kearns, and Mary O'Gara, who brought the other 9 or 10 players. And what they differed over was what to do in this dire economic circumstance. Mary O'Gara wanted to pack up and go home as long as they had money left to go home. Eddie Ainsmith wanted to continue on to the other islands of Japan. Leona and the two oldest players on the Bobbies, Ruth and Netta, decided to go with Ainsmith. So in early November, they hadn't even been in Japan in 3 weeks, Mary O'Gara and the rest of the Bobbies took a ship back to Seattle and took the train to Philadelphia. Ainsmith, Leona, Ruth, and Netta went on to the other islands to play. And it was disastrous. What happened then is unconscionable. Ainsmith left Japan. Eddie and Loretta Ainsmith left Japan in December because they said if they didn't, they called the 3 young women, Leona, Netta, and Ruth together and said, if we don't leave now, we won't have any money left to go home. They took the boat home. They left 3 teenagers behind. When Eddie and Loretta Ainsmith got to the United States, they did not tell the parents of these 3 young women that they had left them behind. Moreover, not one of the 3 young women wrote home to tell their parents that they had been left behind. They were, on all accounts, everyone was probably too ashamed and too embarrassed. Finally, one of Leona's brothers found out what had happened by reading in the newspaper that Eddie and Loretta Ainsmith were back in Washington, D.C. Her father then borrowed $300 to pay for her fare to come home, and in January of 1926, the funds were finally raised and the 3 young women took the ship home across the Pacific Ocean during a gigantic storm at sea. Leona was washed overboard and died at sea. This affected Nellie, who was at that time 14 years old, profoundly. She was haunted by her sister's death and never ceased talking about it. She lived to be 92. And she was devoted to the memory of her sister Leona. Nellie had and gave me some of Leona's possessions, her notebooks, her letters, her uniform, her baseballs. But besides her profound sadness, Nellie too was a baseball player. And she wanted to play ball. But her mother wouldn't allow it. Her father understood how much Nellie wanted to play ball, and in March of 1926, actually I think it was June of 1926, Maud Nelson and the All-Star Ranger girls were taking a train through West Union on their way north from playing in the South, and they stopped in West Union and played the town team. Nellie's father took her down to meet Maud, and he told Maud how much Nellie loved baseball. Maud said to this 14-year-old, well, let's see what you can do. She took her out in the field with some of her best players and watched, and Maud was impressed. But of course, this was a 14-year-old who still had to finish school. So Maud told her to get in touch with her after Nellie, graduated. So when Nellie graduated, she wrote a letter to Maud Nelson, saying, okay, I've graduated, and I would really like to try out for the All-Star Ranger girls. Maud wrote back to say, dear Nellie, if you remember then your father had you throw and catch for me, and I could see then that you had the ability to play with some more experience, as then you were too young. Owing to what happened to your sister, I would not wish for your parents to feel worry about you, and in fact, I would have to have their consent before I agreed to have you on the club. Nellie was of legal age. She was 18 years old, but Maud would not take her on without her parents' permission because of what had happened to Leona. Well, her mother would not allow her to go. So, Nellie wore it, and the next year asked her mother again. Nellie was now 20. I guess she graduated at the age of 19. Nellie asked her mother again, and her mother said no, under no circumstances. So Nellie did what any red-blooded young woman would do. She ran away from home. She packed her bags This is a 20-year-old. She took the train north to Chicago, telling her mother, "Mom, I'm going to stay with one of her sisters who lived in Chicago." Now, it is true. She went to her sister's apartment. She stayed with her sister, but all along she knew there were going to be tryouts for the All-Star Ranger girls in Lincoln Park. And so she went, she tried out. Maud asked, "Well, you know, what's the story?" And Nellie said, "I'm not living at home, I'm on my own." So she signed up and off she went with the All-Star Ranger girls. When they reached Ohio, she wrote to her mother and said, "Mom, I'm on the road, here's my itinerary." This is Nellie, right behind Margaret. They were the two youngest players on the team, and they were friends and would play tennis together a lot. Imagine the energy, playing 2 or 3 baseball games a day, and then going out, what shall we do? Let's go play some tennis. This is one of, let me go back there. Nellie, as you can imagine, she kept all of Leona's things. She also kept all of her own things. This is a baseball that she gave me from the 1933 All-Star Ranger girls with everyone's name on it. She also gave me one from the 1934 team with the name that you will recognize, Rose Gacioch. Okay, Nellie kept clippings, but she clipped the name of the newspaper and the date off, so I have a really hard time tracing down what some of these were. But here's Nellie, and I think this is Cecilia Bridle, who was a pitcher for the team. This clipping says, "All-Star Ranger girls of Chicago defeated the Italians to the astonishment of a great crowd. Gisolo, the initial sacker, and Kearns, right gardener, in particular drew the applause of the fans, handling themselves in the field with the air of veteran big leaguers." Now, what were Nellie's dreams? They were very specific. She had 2 dreams. One, she loved historic sites, and in particular, she wanted to see the buildings of Europe. She had a whole list of what she wanted to see in Europe, the castles, the Eiffel Tower, but her wish was twofold. This wish did not stand by itself. This wish was always connected to the wish to travel safely, to come home safely, as her sister did. Now this brings us to Rose Gacioch, the third of Margaret, Nellie, and Rose. Rose was born in Wheeling, West Virginia in 1915. She was the youngest of 4 children. Her parents emigrated here from Poland. Her father died before Rose was born. And although her mother remarried when Rose was 5, I think, the fact is that Rose grew up very poor. She told me she never wore shoes to school because she couldn't afford shoes. None of her brothers or sisters could afford, none of her sisters, I don't know if she had brothers, could afford shoes. But Rose was always free to play baseball after school and after chores. And she was fascinated by pitching. She studied pitching. She found an old mattress in a dump. She dragged it up to her yard, put a rope through it somehow, cut a hole into it, put a rope through it, and hung it from a tree branch and spent her time pitching at the center of the mattress. Once she had perfected that, and this took months and years, she then practiced making the ball curve to the left or right of the mattress. She got really good at that. She cut a hole out of the center of this mattress and practiced pitching at this perfect strike zone. And when the Yankees were on their way north from spring training in Florida, Rose would cut school to see them play. She said her mother would go crazy with anger that Rose had cut school. But as Rose said, there was nothing she could do about it. I'd do it again the next year. She loved baseball so much. Now, the road to baseball for Rose wasn't easy. When she was 15 years old, her mother died. Rose had to move in with her older sister, and she also had to quit school to help support herself and her sister and her sister's family. She got a job at Wheeling Corrugated, where she played on the factory baseball team. The president of the plant, Jack Felton, watched Rose play baseball, and he was very impressed. The president of the plant knew Maud Nelson. And so in 1934, he wrote to Maud Nelson telling her about Rose Gacioch. So now, March 1934, Maud has heard of Willing, and she has heard of Rose Gacioch. Maud must have received that letter in the middle of her tour for that year, 1934, because Margaret Gisolo remembers very vividly that the All-Star Ranger girls had their itinerary and were on their way to New Jersey when suddenly Maud Nelson said, well, change of plans, we're going down to Wheeling. Maud rescheduled the team, and the All-Star Ranger girls headed to Wheeling. Maud held a tryout specifically for Rose Gacioch, and Rose made the team. This is a photo of Rose from Nellie's scrapbook. Everyone was very impressed with Rose. Margaret Gisolo watched her play at the tryouts and went back to her room and wrote, "Nice player!" exclamation mark. Maud was probably even more impressed because she immediately said, Rose, welcome to the team. You're pitching tonight, 9 innings. And most of the women who pitched for the All-Star Rangers pitched 7 innings. Rose twirled the entire 9 innings and won. Rose Gacioch twirled the entire battle for the Chicagoans and had the crowd cheering her efforts from beginning to end. But Rose not only pitched, she was a great hitter too, which I will get into in a moment. Okay, so here's Rose on this team, leaving Wheeling, leaving her job at the corrugated. Rose is, Lee Chandler, sorry, okay. I interviewed all these people for years, Lee, Margaret, Nellie, Rose. Lee, remember, he's the fast runner, the home run hitter, the fast runner. Said, when I brought up Rose's name, he just lit up and said, Rose was one of the finest runners I've ever seen. She could really run faster than me, faster than anybody on the team. She was exceptional. So keep that in mind as we see Rose's later career. At the age of 18, she's faster than the 6'1" Lee Chandler. And many a time with the All-Star Ranger girls, Rose turned triples into home runs. And I have all these newspaper clippings in different towns throughout New Jersey, Delaware, the New England, Pennsylvania, where they play. I have clippings indicating that. But Rose was also a rookie. And you know that workmates and teammates love to pull practical jokes on rookies. You all know what short sheeting is, right? Okay, where you fold the sheet in half horizontally, tuck it in as if there's a top and bottom sheet. Okay. Actually, that Margaret called that, this is from Margaret's diary, she called it tying Rose's bed. When I spoke to Margaret, she said it was short sheeting. Tied Rose, this is Margaret's writing, tied Rose's bed. That's Nellie and Margaret who did this. But I think she slept on top of the sheets. Rose didn't even notice. Never so much laughing before. They were having a good time. They were youthful and exuberant and were doing what they loved best, which was playing baseball. And I think one of the reasons that Rose didn't even notice and slept on top of the sheets was that Rose had something else on her mind besides baseball, and that was food. Rose grew up poor and she grew up hungry, very, very hungry. When Maud would take them on their cultural tours, Maud often took them to, now if they were in Chicago, they'd go to the Sara Lee factory and get handouts. Okay, but Maud took them to places that produced food, they would get handouts, and that was Rose's favorite place, okay? Forget about William Penn's landing place. Rose liked the places that gave out food. One of the things that Rose did, because she was always hungry, she was always hungry. Nellie Kearns commented, Nellie thought Rose was the finest player she had ever seen anywhere. But then there was this pause and Nellie said, but boy, could she eat. She was always eating, she was always hungry. That was going to come back to haunt Nellie in a moment, as we will see. Before every game began, Rose would buy peanuts because they were cheap. And then, I can't believe this, Rose would stuff them into her glove. She'd stand there in the outfield and wait to catch a fly ball. Okay, because what was her alternative? In order to shell the peanuts, she would have had to have taken a glove off, which she couldn't do while she was out there. So this way, she just waited for the ball to break the peanuts, and then she would reach her hand in and take out, or spit out the shell, and she would eat while she was playing center field. Well, one time, they toured a bubble gum factory. I don't know if it was Bazooka or what, but it was the kind of bubble gum that comes in flat sheets with a waxed coating. Rose put the bubble gum in the back pocket of her uniform pants. I could not get attractive uniform pants, so you just have to imagine the denim pants were more attractive. And she kept thinking about that bubble gum through the whole game. Right about the 4th or 5th inning, Rose thought, I can't stand it, I have to have some bubble gum. So with the glove on this hand, she reached into her back pocket and was trying to take the plastic wrap, the waxy wrap, off the bubble gum. Wham! Someone hits a ball, it's coming her way, she's not ready, she doesn't get it, a runner scores. Maud was extremely upset and said, fine, $50. That was 1 month's pay. 1 month's pay. And if this expression were around in 1934, Maud would have said, keep your head in the game, Rose. Now, Rose's dream was very concrete. All she wanted to do was play baseball. That was her life's ambition. But 1934 was not a good year for that dream, or that ambition. Because that was the depth of the Great Depression. Maud thought in 1933, and everyone in the country thought, that 1933 was the bottom and things would definitely get better. When Maud's teams were playing in the 1920s, she charged a quarter per person admission and had no difficulty getting that money. In 1933, she was down to charging 10 cents and was having difficulty getting money because people did not have 10 cents to go to a baseball game. In 1934, she charged 5 cents and no one came. So there was no income for the teams. She could not afford to pay them their $2 a day meal money. She couldn't afford to pay them their $50 a month. She couldn't afford to put them up in inns or pay gas money for 2 vans. So, in late August of 1934, in upstate New York, near the Canadian border, Maud decided to call it quits. She had been playing baseball since 1892. She had gone through several economic depressions with the country, but she had never seen anything this bad. She gave the players their choice of coming back to Chicago on the van, in the vans, at which point in Chicago she would pay them to go to their respective homes, or of leaving from wherever they were in upstate New York. Lee Chandler chose to hike into Canada, which was just a couple miles away, and catch a freight train back. He'd always wanted to ride the rails the way people were doing in the Great Depression. So that's how he got back to Chicago. He told me it was a mistake. He didn't have any food for over 48 hours. It was dirty. It was cold in August. But it was something he'd always wanted to do. Rose decided to go back to Chicago with the team and get her money to come back home to Wheeling. But when the vans reached Cleveland, Rose became so homesick that she said to Maud, I changed my mind. I would really like to just go home. Maud gave her the bus money to go to Wheeling, and Maud gave her back her $50 fine. So, what about their dreams? What happened to these 3 great players, these 3 youngest members of the 1934 All-Star Ranger girls? To refresh her memory, Margaret's dream involved movement, but she wasn't sure what. Nellie's dream was to see historic sites, specifically in Europe. She had a long list written out, and to travel safely, and Rose's was to play baseball. So looking at Margaret first, what happened to her? She was the only one of the three that did not return home. In 1934, when the All-Star Ranger girls ended their season, Margaret decided she was going to college. She went to the University of Indiana in Pennsylvania. She graduated with a degree in physical education. When World War II broke out, she joined the Waves. When the war ended, she went back to college and got an advanced degree. And in 1954, she was hired by Arizona State University as their tennis instructor. But while she was there as a tennis instructor, she also founded their department of dance. And what she really loved doing was teaching dance, which is movement personified, to athletes. And she taught dance to many football players. I don't follow football that much, so I don't remember their names, but I love baseball, and here, Mr. October, Reggie Jackson, was one of Margaret's students at the University of Arizona. I asked Margaret what playing baseball meant to her in her dreams. She said, playing baseball was a good experience. It gave me a lot of confidence in myself, which carried over in my life later on. And I sometimes wonder if Maud Nelson had not been around to sign Margaret Gisolo to the All-Star Ranger girls, how Margaret's life might have been different. If that was the only place she had to play baseball, and she played it there for 6 years. It meant a lot to her character, her confidence, and her later life, her achieving of her dreams. What happened to Nellie? Nellie did go home. She got a job as a bookkeeper at a local hardware store. When World War II came, she joined the WACs. The reason she joined the WACs was twofold. She felt she should do something for the war effort, but she also signed on her military papers. You know, they asked, where would you like to be stationed? What do you think she said? Europe! Do you really think they sent her there? No. Here she is, dreaming of the historic sites of Europe, even though it was the European Theater of Operations at that time. And they sent her to WAC training in Iowa. And she's thinking all along she's going to be sent to Europe because that's what she requested. After basic training, in the middle of the night, every WAC in her unit was awakened at midnight, put on a train, sealed train, curtain so you can't see the lights, and headed west, where they were put on a troop ship in San Francisco. And Nellie told me that she was terrified. The minute she stepped on that ship, she looked down and she could swear she saw Leona's face looking up at her from the water. And she didn't want to go. She felt she would never return. The Pacific, the ocean that her sister died on. She was shipped to New Guinea, where day and night the big guns were booming. And she worked as a decoder. She and the other WAC she was with, other WACs she was with, that's hard to say, worked as a decoder for MacArthur for 4 years. On your left is a picture of Nellie. She was the first one off the ship as it landed on New Guinea. The Army had already stripped all the trees to use them to build cabins for soldiers to live in. So a whole island for over a year and a half was nothing but mud, and that's Nellie slogging through the mud. And the other is a photo of her in 1945 after the war ended. That's her hut or cabin that she worked in New Guinea. And I said that Nellie's amazement with Rose's appetite would come back to haunt Nellie. Every WAC there lost between 25 and 40 pounds. Their clothes wouldn't fit. They all soldiers got inferior food in World War II. I mean, my father was in World War II, and he tells me horror stories about the things he was given to eat. Nellie said that the only thing that kept them alive was butter, which they would just eat as sticks of butter, and Milky Way candy bars, which were out in a big bowl on the table for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And Nellie said that when she got back home, she ate and ate and ate, and it reminded her of Rose, because she ate and ate and ate until she gained back the 25 pounds. So Nellie got to travel far and wide and returned home safely. And it meant so much to Nellie that she played with the All-Star Ranger girls, because that was her test. She figured if she could go play baseball and come home safely, her life would be okay, and she was very satisfied with that experience. What about Rose? Rose also came home to Wheeling, West Virginia. She went back to work in the corrugated factory, and she didn't really like softball, but she could make $25 a weekend playing softball in Madison Square Garden. Rose was an exceptional athlete with great intelligence, and she taught herself to play softball, went touring with all the big softball teams every weekend, and then came home to Wheeling and worked in the factory. And Rose pretty much figured, 1 year, that's it, 1 year of my life I got to play baseball. It was fantastic, but there isn't anything else. Because the Bloomer teams were gone. 1934 was the last year. Then one day, December of 1943, Rose and her workmates were having lunch in the factory, and one of her workmates points to the paper and says, "Look, Rose, there's an article about women playing baseball, something called the All-American Girls Baseball League." Rose got so excited. She said, "I'm going to try out and make the team." And her workmates told her, "Oh, Rose, you're too old." She was 28. The women who were playing in the league were 16, 17, and 18 years old. Rose didn't faze her. She knew she could make the team. She replied, "Just you wait and see." She asked the president of Corrugated to find out when and where the tryouts were. They were held in Wheeling in the spring of 1944. She went to the tryouts, and she was assigned to the South Bend Blue Sox. The way the All-American Girls Baseball League worked was you were assigned to a team. And because the commissioners of the league, there were 6 teams in 1944, and they wanted all 6 teams to come in within 2.5 games of each other. They didn't at the end. They figured it wasn't a very exciting season if one team was 8.5 games out of first place. They wanted a really tight race, and so every single year in December, the commissioners of the league would look at all the players and assign them to make everything come out even, or so they thought. So Rose was assigned to the South Bend Blue Sox. Her manager there was Bert Niehoff, who used to play for the Phillies, the Reds, the Cardinals, and the Giants. Almost all the managers of the AAGBL teams were former major leaguers. I think only 2 weren't. So Bert taught Rose to play even better baseball because, of course, major league skills are the top. They're the best skills they are. And baseball players spend a lot of time sitting next to each other in the dugout talking baseball. What was the fastest pitch you ever saw? What was the worst put out, etc., etc. And they tell stories and impart knowledge that way. So Rose learned not only by actual playing and being told that was good, that was bad, but by talking. She really loved baseball and baseball history. Now, at the end of the 1944 season, with Rose on the South Bend Blue Sox, Bert Niehoff and the owners of the South Bend Blue Sox told the president, he's the guy who was going to Chicago for the annual reallocation, they told him, "Do not trade Rose Gacioch." Every team got to protect 10 of its 18 players. Rose was #1 on the Blue Sox list. Do not trade her. The president goes to Chicago, returns and says, I traded Rose Gacioch. You cannot imagine the anger, the hostility at this man. In fact, they rewrote the rules as to what powers the president had on the basis of what he did. Why did he do it, they asked him. He felt that Rose Gacioch didn't speak perfect English. She spoke working class English. Okay? Her job was to be a great baseball player, and that's what she was. Her job was not to speak perfect English, just the way the job of all the women, 663 women who played in the All-American Girls Baseball League, their job was really not to look pretty and curl their hair and paint their fingernails, but those are the things the league made them do. So, Rose was very hurt by this, that someone would judge her baseball abilities and her value to the South Bend Blue Sox by what kind of English she spoke. At the same time, as hurt as she was, there must have been something in Rose that was thinking, whatever you do, Brer, don't throw me into that briar patch. Don't throw me into that briar patch, whatever you do, because the president traded her to the Rockford Peaches, the winningest team in All-American Girls Baseball League history. The season was 2 years old. They had already won 1 World Series, and they went on to win 5 in 12 years. That is Rose. You see her right there. I think she's very happy.
I miss her.
To be a Rockford Peach. And that is Bill Allington, who managed the Rockford Peaches for all 12 years of their existence. He actually was not a major leaguer, he was a minor leaguer.
Where was Rose? I missed her picture.
Right here. Oh, right there.
Oh, okay.
Okay, what did she do her first year with the Rockford Peaches, 1945? She was assigned to right field, where she had 31 assists. That is an all-time AAGBL record, 31 assists. The next closest in 12-year history, I think, was 17 assists. That's due to Rose's baseball knowledge, her speed, and her great throwing arm, and her instincts. She hit 9 triples, which was the record that year. I don't want to take time to say much about this, but the AAGBL evolved from softball to hardball. It went from a 12-inch softball underhand pitching in 1943 to overhand pitching in 1948, and base paths increased until everything was major league level. So, some of the records in the early years when it was softball are lower numbers than when it was baseball. Also, she hit 44 RBIs that year, a 1945 league record, and the Rockford Peaches won the World Series again. Now, that's a picture of Rose at bat, and I hope she's hitting either a triple or one of her inside the ballpark home runs, which she continued to do for the Peaches. And that's Rose in the center there, pulling up her socks. I like to think she's thinking, I better keep these socks straight or they'll trade me. But she knew they would never trade her. She was extremely happy with the Peaches, and they were very happy with her. Her name, by the way, her nickname was Rockford Rosie. Well, about 1948, remember I told you that the league went to overhand pitching. One day, Bill Allington said, "Hey, Rose, you used to be a pitcher, didn't you, back there when you were traveling with the Bloomer Girl teams?" And she said, "Yeah, why?" And he said, "Well, you know, you're getting older, you're almost 33, and you've gained a little bit of weight, Rose, and you just aren't as fast as you used to be." And she sort of looked at him and said, "I'm as good as I ever was." And he said, "Okay, the truth is, I need people who can pitch overhand." Because most of the women coming into the league were underhand softball pitchers. 1948, you couldn't pitch underhand, you couldn't even pitch sidearm. You had to pitch overhand. That was it. It was baseball now. Pure and simple. So Rose said, "Oh, okay, I'll pitch." He put Rose in as a pitcher, and in 1948, she had a 14 wins, 5 losses record. In 1951, she had 20 wins, 7 losses, a 1.68 ERA, and was the only 20-game winner of 1951. In 1953, she pitched a 7-inning no-hitter. That meant it was a doubleheader. League rules were that doubleheaders were 7 innings only. So she pitched a perfect game. It just happened to be a 7-inning game. And she was elected to the All-Star teams in 1952 as pitcher, 1953 as utility infielder, and 1954 as pitcher. I would say Rose lived her dream. And a really interesting thing, I interviewed Rose over many years for many months, and at one point I asked her what playing on that 1934 Bloomer Girl team meant to her. And I just didn't expect the answer that I got. She said, I love those cowboy hats and black jackets. Those were made for me. And then she paused and said, going with the Rangers was the best thing that ever happened to me. It just opened her mind and knowledge that women can play baseball professionally. So that is the story of Margaret, Nellie, and Rose when women played baseball, because when women played baseball, their dreams came true. Thank you. Thank you. I will stay around as long as anyone wants me to stay around. Yes.
2 questions. The first one is, how did they play in the snow if their season was from January to October?
It doesn't snow in Florida, usually.
And the second question is, which team was represented in the movie?
The movie, okay, good question. The movie was the Rockford Peaches, but what the movie directors did, which I think is absolutely brilliant, they took the best of each of the 12 years and compressed them together. Even though it wasn't historically accurate, it touched your heart and told the true story. They took overhand pitching, which didn't come in until 1948. They put it in 1943. They set the movie in 1943 because of the war. Okay, they put the role that Tom Hanks played was former major leaguer Jimmy Fox. Okay, and he was the manager, not of the Rockford Peaches, but of the South Bend Blue Sox, and he didn't start managing until 1951. So they took all these elements and made a great film.
I have something to say.
Yeah.
I grew up with Rosie because she's my cousin. She taught me how to jitterbug. She did. She said, she did this tuxedo dress. She put that record on it.
I'm so glad you said that, because one of the things that Margaret and Rose told me, not Nellie, but Margaret and Rose both told me, that after the last game was over, and they carried portable lights so that they could play night, they would all go to a bar to eat. Okay, and Mike either housed them with Italian-American families who fed them, okay, and let them stay there for free. I paid for the food and stuff. And then they went out to a bar and had a couple of drinks and danced all night. Now, Mom had a curfew. The curfew was midnight, which I think is pretty lenient, okay, and Maude did bed checks, and when she caught Margaret coming in at 1:30, didn't play her for several days. Yeah, but they loved to dance. Yeah.
Are these women still around?
No, they died, Margaret died 3 years ago. Rose died in, I think, 1995? Yeah, 94, 95. And Nellie died, I think, in 1998.
Did they ever play in Wheeling?
Well, they played in Wheeling in 1934 when Rose was signed, okay? And I don't know who they played. It's in the scrapbooks that Nellie gave me. It's hard for me to know because she cut all the names and dates out. I just have the article. But they did play here at least once. And I think that in the 1920s, Maude's teams came through here.
And where would they have played?
Pulaski Field.
You're probably Pulaski Field.
Wow.
Yeah. I imagine even if they sometimes played against factory teams, they would have gone to Pulaski Field. Although I suppose they could, I don't know where the factory teams played. Some of them had their own ballparks in the back. They often played at American Legion parks. I don't know if there was one here. I would imagine that there was. I don't know. Other questions? Yes.
I don't know where the nickname came from, but when Rosie played with the fellas down on Pulaski Field before all of this happened to her, she had the nickname of Rosie Gaspipe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
her brother too.
Her brother was
Steve.
Gaspipe.
Yeah.
Her brother Steve was Gaspipe too, so
Yeah.
where they got it from, I don't know, because
Brother.
I could have relative.
Well, someone here before was telling me, just a second, was telling me that they thought it came from Gacioch, maybe it might have been a
Yeah,
correction.
it was like-
Yes, but I don't know, I thought maybe the district they lived in might have been Gasworks, Gaspipe, I don't know. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that my father and my two uncles knew her quite well. She came to our house when I was a little girl, I can remember that. And she came with Helen Wazovic, who is her niece that lives in Sterling Heights, Michigan. And my dad used to always talk about her curveball, and he used to tell me about her curveball. He always referred to her as Rosie Gaspipe. But my uncle is still living. My father just passed away, but my uncle did tell me that she got the name Rosie Gacioch because the kids that she went to school with at St. Lad's did not know how to pronounce the Polish pronunciation of Gacioch is Gacioch, and they couldn't pronounce it, and so they nicknamed her Rosie Gacioch.
Yes. A very common story of not being able to pronounce something and it comes out. It comes out usually a compound word of two English words smashed together. Other comments? Yes.
Well, I think this is really well done. How long did it take for you to do all this?
Well, my book, Women at Play, The Story of Women at Baseball, which has a whole chapter on Rose, that book took 4 years of research, and I thought I'd have a year to write it, but the publisher gave me 92 days to write it, so I worked 13, 14-hour days. Putting this together, probably 30 hours. It's, you have to scan the photo in, and then you trim it, and then you drag it in, and then you sort of decide, okay, what order do I want to do this in? What colors do I want? It's fun though.
Are you saying you have another book in the making?
I always have books in the making.
No, but
Okay.
what is this one that you said?
Okay, Women at Play, the one that came out in 1993, has been out of print for about 18 years, okay? And the reason I can't reprint it is the photos in it cost me $5,600 in 1993, and it cost me $8,000 now, and I just can't do it. I've thought of reprinting the words without the pictures, and then I figured I would get so much flack from people who have seen the original, which has 99 photos in it. Okay, that I just don't want to go there. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that book. But I continue to write about baseball. I will have a book coming out on the 20th anniversary of Women at Play, which will have this essay in it, basically this talk that I've given, and other articles on Rose. That'll be out in March of 2013.
No, but you referenced the whole chapter on Rose.
Yes.
What book would that be? The
Women
original?
at Play. Yes. Is there a copy in the library, Sean?
Unfortunately, no. By the time we became aware of it, obviously it was out of print for a long time.
Yeah.
I bought a copy for myself.
Yeah. You could probably find it on eBay for my guess is $7 or $8. Women at Play. I'll write it down for you afterwards.
I get something else to tell about Rosie. The last time I saw her a few years back at Center Market, she said that she couldn't get out of the car when she was little.
Yeah.
I saw her to see her, and she said, yeah, in that movie, Penny Marshall, she wanted me to play like Madonna's part. I didn't like Madonna. Rosie Madonna's part. That's what she said.
That's a real interesting, there were 663 players, and probably 500 of them feel the part was after them. I honestly don't know who.
Well, Penny Marshall came to talk to her.
Yes. Yeah, but Penny Marshall came to talk to many of those players, probably 60 or 70 as far as I know. It could be that she modeled, that Madonna was modeled on Rose. I think that the character that Madonna plays in the movie has some aspects of Rose in
Really?
it.
I think so too.
Yeah. Other questions? Comments? Yes?
Now, it'd be interesting to know, Kennesaw and Landis will allow women to play in Major League Baseball. Do you think that they could play, they have the skill as Rose or whoever else had the skill to play with those men in Major League Ball?
Yeah, I think they can. And you shouldn't listen to what I say, you should listen to what people like Hank Aaron say. Hank Aaron played baseball with a woman named Toni Stone in the Negro Leagues, and he has long believed and spoken out that women can, he thinks they'd be great infielders because nimbler and a little bit quicker. He is a strong proponent of women playing baseball. There are many women who play regulation baseball today on teams that are not funded by Major League Baseball because Major League Baseball won't give money to women who play baseball. But they're great. They go around the world playing a World Series. There's teams in this country, Canada, Japan, Denmark, Australia has fantastic women's baseball teams. The problem is there's a technical legal problem. The major leagues do not exclude women. There's nothing in their charters that says women are not permitted to be signed. But ever since 1953, the minor leagues have had a law, it's not a law, it had a regulation formed by Gene Troutman, the president of the minor leagues, saying that no woman can be signed to a minor league team. So, how are you going to get to the majors unless you can go through the official minors? And the minor leagues will not take that off the record. They deny it's there, but the letter's still in the file and no one's rescinded it. And no official minor league will sign a woman. There are women playing minor league baseball today. There was Isla Borders, who pitched for Minneapolis teams in the 1990s. There's a woman, Tiffany Brooks, who plays for a Texas and California team, but those are all what are called maverick or independent minor league teams. They aren't affiliated with any major league team. There's a hand here. Yes?
I don't know about women competing with men, even at the Class A level in hardball, but they are fantastic as pitchers in softball. Mickey Owens, he of the fame of dropping that famous third strike in the World Series, struck out 3 times against a woman pitching.
Yeah, Joan Joyce, I think. Yeah, was it Joan Joyce? Or Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig also struck out against women playing softball. In fact, Ruth made some funny comments about it would just slow down enough so I could see it. I could hit it. But most people think that the way women will get into Major League Baseball, if they do, and they are fighting very hard to do, is as a pitcher. That's what most people believe, that it's a specialized position and women will come in as pitchers. Yes?
Have you ever played baseball?
Yes, I grew up playing baseball. I never even had a softball in my hand until I was 16, and my gym teacher gave it to me, and I was horrified. What is this big thing that I'm supposed to throw like that? Yeah. I grew up playing with boys and girls. Everyone on the street would just find an empty lot, and we played 2 or 3 games a day, all summer long. Yes?
I'm just curious, did Rosie die here in Wheeling or?
No, I think she died in Michigan. She was staying with her. She was in a retirement home, I think. First, she lived with her niece for a long time, I think. Yeah. Yeah, so that's where she died. Yeah. She buried here, though, yes? No, there? Someone recently sent me a picture of her gravestone. Other questions or comments?
Did you say of her grandson?
Of her gravestone.
She never married?
No, she never married. She told me that she was engaged, but that the guy wanted her to stop playing baseball. So she gave back the ring. And not an uncommon story. Other questions, comments? Well, you're welcome to come up after and talk to me.
Yodeling Dick Lunch with books. Lunch with books has books and hooks and hats and cracks and yarns and things and rocks and snaps and more and more. Lunch with books. Lunch with books. At the Ohio County Public Library in Wheeling, West Virginia. It'll make you feel like yoga. Hey, yogi, yogi. Mostly on Tuesdays at noon. Bring your lunch, we'll provide the pot. And it's all free. Lunch!